I never thought my quiet suburban street would turn into a battlefield. But the night Karen Spruce, our brand new HOA president, decided my old Ford truck belonged to her son, everything changed. She didn't try to buy it. She didn't even bother to hide her arrogance. She just smiled that razor-thin smile of hers and said it outright. Ryan's birthday is coming up. That truck would be perfect for him. Her words cut deeper than she realized. Because Betty, my 1999 Ford F-150, wasn't just a truck. She was part of me. Black gloss paint chipped from gravel roads, a driver's seat worn into the exact shape of my frame, and an engine I rebuilt piece by piece with my own 2 hands. Betty wasn't for sale. Not now. Not ever. But Karen didn't hear no. She heard challenge. That very afternoon, while I was still drying Betty after a wash, she lifted her phone like a sword and dialed 911, claiming I was harassing her at the fence. The cops showed up, split us like bickering school kids, and logged the incident. I remember the way she smiled for the officer's body cam, smug and sweet as honey. "He's hostile about a truck," she said, while I stood there with a wet rag in my hand. The officer left me with an incident number. At the time, I thought it was over. I didn't know then that number would be my shield when things escalated. A week later, the sky was painted in bruised purples and golds when I stood in my driveway with 2 police officers, watching one of them steal my truck without ever touching a key. It was just a demonstration, part of a community outreach program after a string of car thefts nearby. But when Officer Davis held up that little black box, explained how a thief could capture the weak signal from my key fob inside the house and trick Betty into unlocking, my stomach turned cold. And when the lock gave that metallic thunk and Betty's engine roared alive under someone else's hands, I felt something I hadn't felt since my Navy days before a night launch. Adrenaline tangled with icy dread. My son Phil was watching from the porch. 16 years old, sharp-eyed, already taller than me, and quiet in a way that made you trust he was always thinking 2 steps ahead. He asked the officer, calm as anything, "So they don't need the key at all, not even to drive away?" The officer shook his head. "Once it's running, it'll run until it's empty or until it's stripped in a chop shop." That's when my wife, Deborah, stepped out, wiping her hands on a towel. My rock, my balance. She'd been a Navy signals analyst. Her world was patterns, data, the invisible whispers in the air. She put it simply, "So the only defense is blocking the signal." The officer nodded. A Faraday box, tin foil, whatever it took. And just then, right on cue, Karen's SUV crawled past, phone raised high like a periscope. She didn't wave, didn't speak, just filmed Betty, filmed the cops, filmed me before disappearing down the street. That was when the truth settled deep in my bones. Karen wasn't bluffing. She wasn't going to let it go. Her son's 16th birthday was 2 weeks away, and Betty, my Betty, was her prize. So that night when the police left, my house transformed. The living room wasn't a living room anymore. It was a command post. Deborah was in her element, setting up cameras, dash cams, motion sensors, even slipping a GPS tracker into Betty's frame. Phil and I installed a hidden kill switch, wired into the fuel pump and disguised inside a hollow cassette tape in the old tape deck. It felt absurd, like we were fortifying against an enemy attack, but this wasn't paranoia. This was preparation. I'd spent years in the Navy learning one lesson over and over: don't wait for the enemy to strike. Prepare the battlefield, control the engagement. And across the street, through the binoculars in my lap, I could see the glow of the Spruce house. Karen, Ryan, her husband, silhouettes moving behind drawn curtains, like shadows rehearsing a play. I knew then what they were planning. I didn't know the hour. I didn't know the night. But the clock was ticking. And when they came for Betty, they wouldn't be facing a defenseless neighbor. They'd be walking straight into a trap. They thought they were hunting me, but the truth was I was hunting them. The first night after the officers left, the street felt different. Too quiet. I sat in the dark living room, binoculars in my lap, every nerve tuned like a live wire. The glow from the Spruce house spilled across their perfect lawn, but to me it looked like a stage, and they were actors rehearsing a crime they hadn't realized was already doomed. Deborah turned our kitchen table into a command center, laptops, wires, camera feeds stacked on the screen like something out of an intelligence op. "Ring cameras boosted," she said, her voice steady. Dash cam set to parking mode, audio enabled. GPS tracker is live, pinging every 60 seconds. She didn't look nervous. She looked sharp, focused. My wife was built for this. Phil worked in the garage with surgical precision, wiring the kill switch into Betty's heart. A hollow cassette tape hid the toggle. Simple, brilliant, invisible. I watched him and felt a mix of pride and sadness. He should have been studying for a math test, not building defenses against our neighbor's greed. By midnight, the house was still. Too still. My instincts from the Navy came back, the long nights waiting on the carrier deck, where silence always meant something was about to break. Deborah's voice crackled soft through the walkie-talkie clipped to my shirt. Nothing yet. Motion sensors clean. We weren't using phones, too easy to trace, too risky with a glow from the screen. Old-school radios only. The hours dragged. The maple leaves rattled like loose coins in the wind. At one point, headlights swept across the window and my heart lurched, only to fade away as a passing car disappeared down the block. At 1:47 a.m., the world shifted. Deborah's whisper came through the radio, sharp, urgent. Movement. North side of the street, 2 houses down, 2 figures, hoodies up. My pulse hammered in my throat. I raised the binoculars, and there they were, 2 silhouettes sticking to the shadows, stumbling through their own bad version of stealth. Amateurs, one taller, one shorter. They split just like the officers had warned. One circling the house, searching for the key fob signal. The other, the shorter one, heading straight for Betty. I didn't need a clear view. My body knew before my eyes confirmed it. It was Ryan. 16 years old, shaking in his hoodie, holding a relay box like a toy. Karen had sent her own son to do her dirty work. Phil, I whispered into the radio, my voice iron. Stay put, no matter what you hear. A beat later, his voice came back, calm as stone. Yes, Dad. Ryan fumbled with the box, glancing around like a thief in a bad movie. Then it happened, the soft, traitorous thunk of Betty's door unlocking. My chest tightened. A sound I'd know anywhere, now weaponized against me. The interior light blinked on for a split second, illuminating his pale, nervous face. Then darkness. A heartbeat later, Betty's engine coughed to life. Hearing my truck roar under someone else's hands was like taking a punch straight to the ribs. But I stayed still, patient, letting the trap play out. Betty rolled forward silently, coasting down the incline of the driveway. No headlights. Just a ghost drifting into the street, right beneath the watchful eye of the streetlight and the unblinking stare of my cameras. That was the mistake they didn't know they were making. Confidence. I raised the second walkie, the one tuned to the receiver I'd hidden in the garage. My voice was low, steady, deliberate. Now, Phil. Somewhere in the garage, my son pressed a button on a rigged garage door remote. A single pulse shot to the receiver. Out on the street, Betty choked once and died. The silence that followed was louder than any gunshot. No sputter, no fight, just sudden death. A 2-ton truck rolled to a stop like it had given up on life. The trap had sprung. Ryan's door flung open. He tumbled out, panic written all over his face. I stepped forward, voice cutting the night. Ryan. He froze, eyes wide. Where's your partner? His words spilled out fast, broken. He ran. Mom said if it went bad, just run. Porch lights snapped on up and down the street. Dogs barked. Neighbors stirred. Tommy, bless him, stumbled out in a robe and Crocs, holding a garden hose like it was a shotgun. Should I spray deterrent? Negative, I said, keeping my eyes on Ryan. We're keeping it boring. Ryan bolted left. I cut the angle sharper, and when he tripped, I caught him, guiding him down with just enough force to pin him without harm. Hands where I can see them, I said, my voice flat. You're not hurt, you're just done. His body trembled beneath my knee. Please, he begged, don't tell her I messed up. Buddy, I said, cold truth in my words. She's the one who told you to mess up. That's when I saw it, the other figure creeping back, amplifier under his arm. Another kid, probably a friend Karen had convinced to play lookout. I stood tall, voice sharp. Stop, leave the box, hands up. The kid froze for half a breath, then ran. The amplifier clattered to the ground, skidding across Tommy's walkway until it smacked into his pink plastic flamingo. Tommy, unfazed, thumbed his hose and gave the kid a polite mist. "Hey, conservation hours," he muttered. The kid vanished into the night. The evidence remained. And just then, Ryan's phone lit up in the grass, buzzing, glowing, a message across the lock screen. The sender, Mom. The text read, "Is it done? Do you have it? Answer me, Ryan." I stared at those glowing words, then down at the terrified kid pinned beneath me. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just theft anymore. This was conspiracy. And Karen Spruce had just handed me everything I needed to bring her empire crashing down. The glow of that single text message burned hotter than a fire. "Is it done? Do you have it? Answer me, Ryan." It wasn't just a smoking gun. It was the hand pulling the trigger. I kept Ryan pinned to the grass, his chest heaving, his voice a cracked whisper. "Please, don't tell her." But the truth was already written in light across his screen. His own mother had orchestrated this. She hadn't just encouraged him, she'd commanded him. And at that moment, I realized this wasn't about my truck anymore. This was about a woman drunk on power, willing to sacrifice her own son just to prove she could take what she wanted. The night was silent except for Ryan's shaky breathing and the rustle of neighbors gathering on porches. Then headlights washed the street. A cruiser rolled up slow, no sirens, no lights, just calm, deliberate authority. Officer Davis stepped out first, tall, steady, the kind of man whose voice could settle a storm. His partner, Reed, followed with practiced efficiency. They didn't need introductions. They already knew the script. I eased off Ryan and raised my hands, palms open. Davis's eyes flicked from me to the boy, then to the backpack lying in the grass. "Everything under control, Tim." "He's not hurt," I said. "But he was inside my truck. It rolled 20 feet before we cut the engine." His phone lit up with instructions from his mother. Davis's jaw tightened. He didn't need to say a word. He'd seen neighbors like Karen before, people who thought power was a license to rewrite reality. He just gave a curt nod and turned toward Reed. "Get the evidence bags." It was like watching gears click into motion. Reed collected the amplifier, the relay box, the phone, all handled like live explosives. Deborah came out carrying a hard drive, her laptop still humming. "Dash cam footage secure," she said, her tone clipped professional. "Ring camera has the approach. Audio caught the engine start and cut off." Phil appeared next, carrying the clear evidence bag we'd prepped earlier. Inside it, the kill switch remote. He handed it over with steady hands. My son wasn't just a bystander anymore. He was part of the operation. Ryan sat on the curb, trembling, his face pale as the streetlight above him. He wasn't cuffed, but he wasn't going anywhere. I could see it in his eyes, the crash of adrenaline, the weight of what he'd just done. He was 16, and his childhood had ended in my driveway. Then Davis picked up the phone. The message glowed across the lock screen for his body cam. "Is it done? Do you have it? Answer me, Ryan." He read it aloud, steady as stone, then powered the phone down. His words carried across the street, across the gathered neighbors. "This is conspiracy to commit auto theft directed by an adult to a minor." He didn't say Karen's name. He didn't have to. Every head turned toward the Spruce house. Curtains twitched, shadows froze. Karen wasn't at the scene, but her fingerprints were all over it. Davis stepped closer, his voice low, meant only for me. "You did good, Tim. You documented everything. This isn't just an attempted theft anymore, it's a case. And the state attorney is going to want it." That hit me like a second punch. This wasn't going to stay on our quiet street. This was climbing higher, faster than Karen ever expected. And yet I didn't feel triumphant. Standing there with my neighbors whispering, my son watching, and a 16-year-old boy shaking on the curb, all I felt was cold. Empty. This was never supposed to happen here. Not over a truck, not over ego. But the truth was undeniable. Karen had just started a war. The officers loaded Ryan into the cruiser, not in cuffs but contained. As they pulled away, Deborah put her arm around Phil's shoulders. He leaned into her, silent, thoughtful, his eyes following the red taillights until they disappeared into the dark. I turned back to Betty. She sat under the streetlight, quiet, whole, untouched, But she didn't feel the same. She wasn't just a truck anymore. She was bait, evidence, and a symbol of defiance. The neighbors lingered, whispering. Some looked at me with sympathy, others with something like awe. But I knew tomorrow morning the gossip chain would run wild, stories would twist, lines would blur, Karen would spin it her way. And she'd use the one weapon she still had, the HOA. As I shut the front door behind us, the weight of it all settled in my chest. Deborah placed the hard drive on the counter like a relic. Phil sat at the table, silent, his hands folded. For a moment, the house was so quiet I could hear the hum of the fridge. Then Deborah broke the silence. She won't stop here. She was right. Karen had failed in the shadows. Now she'd move in the open, where paperwork and power carried sharper edges than crowbars. I looked at my family, then at Betty through the window, parked like a sentinel in the driveway. "Then we'll be ready," I said. Because Karen's spruce had crossed a line. And the moment she turned her son into a criminal pawn, she lost the war she thought she was winning. She just didn't know it yet. She failed in the shadows, so she came in daylight. 2 days after Ryan was caught, the street was unnervingly quiet. The spruce house looked shuttered, blinds drawn, as if shame could be hidden behind fabric. But I knew better. Karen wasn't retreating, she was recalculating. I was in the garage, fine-tuning Betty's timing chain, when Tommy jogged up the driveway, breathless. "Tim, you gotta see this." I wiped my hands and stepped out. And there it was, a massive flatbed tow truck crawling down the street, its diesel engine growling like a predator. Behind it, Karen marched in her pink suit, heels clacking against the pavement like war drums. Her SUV idled at the curb, Ryan in the driver's seat, staring dead ahead, his hands clenched around the wheel. My stomach turned cold. She was really doing it. The flatbed stopped right in front of my driveway. The driver was heavyset, sunburned, with the kind of weary look that said this was just another Tuesday for him. Clipboard in hand, he glanced at Betty, then at me. "Got a call to tow an abandoned vehicle. Black Ford F-150. This it." I laughed once, dry and humorless. "Abandoned? She's 10 feet from my front door. I was just working on her." I gestured to the grease on my hands, the tools on the fender. "She's registered, insured, and running cleaner than your truck. You've got the wrong story." The man's eyes narrowed. He looked at Betty again, then at the work order. The signature at the bottom read clear, Karen Spruce, HOA President. That's when I understood. She hadn't learned a thing. She wasn't going to sneak around anymore. She was going to steal my truck legally, or at least make it look that way. I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only the driver could hear. "The woman who signed that is under felony investigation for attempting to steal this exact truck 2 nights ago. You tow it, you're an accessory. This isn't just paperwork, it's evidence in an active case." The driver blinked, the words hitting him like a hammer. Evidence, felony, accessory. He looked at Betty again, then at me, then back at the clipboard. Slowly, carefully, he folded the order and stuffed it into his back pocket. "Look, man," he muttered, "I just go where they tell me, but this ain't right." Behind him, Karen raised her voice, loud enough for every porch and phone camera on the block. "Community standards will prevail." The patrol car parked down the street edged forward, its officers watching. Deborah lifted her phone inside our window, recording. Tommy shaded his eyes with one hand, shaking his head in disbelief. The driver sighed, put his truck in reverse, and rumbled away, leaving behind nothing but the smell of diesel and a stunned silence. Karen didn't flinch. She dialed a number, hit speakerphone. "Martin," she snapped to a board member on the line, "note this. Non-compliance, hostile posture, fines doubled." Her voice dripped with venom, with confidence. She thought she'd outplayed me. But all she'd done was hand me more ammunition. I crossed my arms, meeting her glare. "Karen, you're being recorded, every word, every action. You just falsified a work order, misused your title, and tried to tow evidence in a felony case." Her face twitched, but the smile stayed plastered on. "Community standards will prevail," she repeated, her tone sugar-sweet, as if saying it enough times would make it true. Then she swept back to her SUV, heels striking the pavement like a retreating queen. Ryan drove her away without a word. The moment they were gone, I pulled out Davis's card and dialed his number. My voice was flat, steady. "Davis, it's Tim Miller." She tried it again, this time with paperwork. There was silence on the other end for half a beat, then his voice came back low and firm. "Sit tight, Tim, don't engage, I'll make a call." An hour later, my phone rang, blocked number. "Mr. Miller, this is Investigator Alvarez, State Attorney's office." Her voice was clipped, sharp, carrying authority like a badge. "I've reviewed the evidence. What happened this morning, that's a gift. She just escalated into abuse of office." I walked her through every detail: the tow truck, the falsified order, Karen's performance on the curb. Alvarez listened, silent until the end. Then she said 5 words that tightened my chest. "How would you feel about bait?" I knew instantly what she meant. They wanted Karen to incriminate herself further, to walk willingly into her own trap. "What do you have in mind?" I asked. Alvarez didn't hesitate. "We'll stage a pretext call, you reach out, sound intimidated, say you just want peace, that the truck isn't worth the fight. Offer to sell it to her for something absurd. $500 cash, we'll record it legally under one-party consent. If she bites, if she admits anything, we've got her voice tying the theft to the harassment." I glanced at Deborah. She was listening, arms folded, her eyes sharp with fury. "She'll be suspicious," I said. "Karen's not stupid." "That's why you have to sell it," Alvarez replied. "Not as a fighter, not as a Navy vet, as a scared neighbor who's had enough. You're not intimidating her, you're folding. Can you play that part?" For a long moment, I didn't answer. My gut burned with anger. I wasn't scared of Karen. I wanted to tear her down brick by brick. But then I looked at Phil, sitting at the kitchen table, quiet, listening. He had to build a kill switch for his 16th birthday. He deserved normal. He deserved peace. So I took a breath and answered, "Yes, I can do it." Because sometimes the hardest part of war isn't fighting. It's pretending you've already lost, just long enough to win. Fear can be faked, but desperation has to feel real. That was the challenge Alvarez gave me. She and her technician sat at our kitchen table the next afternoon, their equipment neat and professional, a small device clipped to our landline like a spider. It wasn't recording here. No, this signal went straight to their office, directly into evidence. Legal, clean, one-party consent. Alvarez's eyes never wavered. "Remember, Tim, you're not the strong neighbor tonight. You're not the guy who wired a kill switch and set a trap. You're a tired father, scared, out of your depth. All you want is peace." I nodded, but inside my blood was boiling. Karen had turned my son into a pawn. She had weaponized her power. She had tried to tow away evidence. And now I had to pretend to beg her for mercy. It was the last role I wanted to play, but if that was what it took to bring her down, I'd play it better than she expected. Deborah stood at the far end of the room, arms crossed, eyes locked on me. She didn't say a word, but I could feel her strength. Phil sat at the table, headphones around his neck, pretending to study. He wasn't studying. He was watching. I picked up the phone. My hand shook, not with fear, but with the cold weight of what this moment meant. One call could decide everything. It rang once, twice, then click. "Hello," her voice was clipped, wary, already on edge. "Karen," I said, letting my voice catch, soft, almost trembling. "It's Tim Miller." Silence. I could hear her breathing, hear the hesitation, the gears grinding in her head. When she finally spoke, her tone was ice. "What do you want?" I swallowed, forcing the words out like I was carrying a boulder. I think we need to talk. This whole thing, it's gotten out of control. My wife's a wreck. My son hasn't slept since that night, and now the police are involved. I can't keep this up." A pause, long, calculating. Then her voice softened, dripping with that false sweetness I knew too well. "Oh, Tim, misunderstandings have a way of snowballing. You've made things harder than they needed to be." I leaned into the role, letting a shaky sigh spill through the line. "I'm not trying to fight you, Karen. I just want peace. Betty, she's just a truck. She's not worth all this. If it makes it go away, I'll sell her to you. For Ryan, $500 cash, you take her and we forget this happened." The silence on the line was deafening. I could almost see her smirk, could almost hear the triumph twisting her lips. She thought she'd broken me. She thought she'd won. "Well," she purred finally, "that does sound reasonable. It's a shame we had to go through all this misunderstanding." Ryan was just being an impulsive boy, and the tow truck, oh, that was just an HOA matter. A clerical error, you understand. But yes, for the sake of neighborhood peace, I think we can agree to your terms. In the corner of my vision, Alvarez raised a hand, sharp and decisive. Got her. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat and forced a relieved chuckle. Thank you, Karen. I really appreciate it. This means a lot. Anything for a neighbor, she said, her voice sickly sweet. I hung up. My hand was slick with sweat. The room was silent for a beat. Then Deborah let out the breath she'd been holding. Alvarez removed her headset, her mouth curving into a grim smile. That's it. That's the rope. She just tied it around her own neck. I sat back, the weight of it crashing over me. Not triumph, not joy, just the heavy, steady pulse of inevitability. Karen had confessed on tape that the tow truck was her doing, that the theft was a misunderstanding. She had accepted the deal, tied the attempted theft to her abuse of HOA authority, and admitted it all under the illusion of victory. But this wasn't victory. This was the beginning of her downfall. Alvarez gathered her equipment with brisk efficiency. We'll package this with the texts, the dash cam footage, the sworn tow truck statement. It's airtight. But, she glanced at me, her eyes serious. I want her to walk into the next mistake in public, in front of everyone. That's when we serve the warrant. I frowned. You mean the HOA meeting? Alvarez nodded. She'll try to use it against you. She'll lean on her authority, double down on the narrative, and that's when we let her confess again. Not just on tape, but on record. In front of her neighbors, in front of us, in front of the state. She won't be able to spin out of it. The plan was set. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, Deborah's hand resting on my chest, her steady breathing the only thing keeping me calm. In the garage, Betty sat under the soft hum of the light, gleaming black, steady, waiting. She wasn't just a truck anymore. She was bait, evidence, and justice rolled into one. The calm before the storm settled over the neighborhood. Karen's house stayed shuttered, but her fingers were busy. Neighbors forwarded me her cheerful HOA email, agenda for the quarterly meeting. Budgets, flower beds, pet waste disposal stations. And then, buried in the list, the line that mattered. Resolution of outstanding property violations and community standards. That was aimed at me, at Betty, at everything she'd failed to take in the shadows. And this time, she'd try to take it in the open. But she didn't know Alvarez would be sitting quietly in the back row. She didn't know officers would be waiting, papers in hand. She didn't know that when she tried to use her little kingdom as a weapon, she'd be signing her own arrest warrant. She thought she was preparing the battlefield, but so was I. And for the first time I felt calm, because this wasn't my war anymore, it was hers. And it was about to end. Power looks invincible, right up until the second it cracks. The night of the HOA meeting, the community center smelled of disinfectant and stale coffee. Beige walls, humming fluorescent lights, and 30 uneasy neighbors shifting in cheap plastic chairs. It wasn't a courtroom, but it might as well have been. Deborah sat beside me calm, her hand folded around mine. Phil was on her other side, serious and watchful. And behind us, blending into the rows of neighbors, Investigator Alvarez waited, casual in khakis and a polo shirt, her expression unreadable. She wasn't here as a guest. She was here as a witness. At the front table, Karen presided like royalty. Pink blazer, papers fanned neatly before her, flanked by 2 board members who looked more like hostages than colleagues. Her smile was practiced, her gavel taps sharp, every gesture screamed control. For the first half hour, she sailed through the agenda, flower bed budgets, new pet waste stations, neighborhood watch patrols. Her voice was crisp, commanding, wielding Robert's rules like a sword to silence anyone who meandered off topic. She was in her element. Then she arrived at her special item. Next, she announced, her gaze sweeping the room before landing squarely on me. We have the resolution of outstanding property violations. As you all know, our covenants exist to maintain community standards. Unfortunately, some residents believe these rules do not apply to them. Whispers rippled across the chairs. Everyone knew who she meant. Karen straightened her papers. Specifically, the matter of an inoperable black Ford truck that has generated multiple complaints. I have personally attempted to resolve this with the resident in question, including offering assistance. When that failed, the HOA was forced to act officially, which was, unfortunately, misinterpreted. Her tone was smooth, her lie was polished, she was rewriting history in real time. I raised my hand, calm, steady. Since it's my truck, may I respond? She hesitated. She couldn't refuse without looking like a tyrant, so she smiled thinly. Of course, Tim, the floor is yours. I didn't stand. I simply turned in my chair, facing my neighbors. I had a small projector set up in front of me, aimed at the blank wall behind her. I think there's been some confusion, I said evenly. So let me clear it up. I tapped my laptop. The first video appeared on the wall, grainy but unmistakable. Two hooded figures creeping toward my driveway, Ryan fumbling with the relay box. The soft thunk of Betty's lock giving way. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Karen's mask twitched. Is that, a neighbor whispered, that's Ryan. Another voice sharper. Karen, those texts, were those yours? I clicked again. A still frame filled the wall, Ryan's phone glowing in the dark grass. The message clear. Is it done? Do you have it? Answer me, Ryan. The sender, Mom. The room erupted in murmurs. Karen leaned forward, her voice cracking sharp through the mic. This is slander. This is an invasion of my son's privacy. Deborah calmly clicked to the next image. The forged tow order signed by Karen Spruce, HOA president. The murmurs grew into outrage. One neighbor whispered, she signed it herself. Another muttered, she tried to tow it. Karen jabbed a finger at me, her voice shrill now. You have been waging war on this board since the day you moved in. You've harassed my family, twisted events. Her words tangled into feedback from the mic. She slammed the gavel. Order, this is a smear campaign. I stayed seated calm, my voice cutting through her shrieking. Karen, I rebuilt a carburetor last night. That's my war, not this. You told your son to steal my truck. You filed false reports, and now you're lying to your neighbors. Her face went blotchy red. She snapped back into the mic. I even took official HOA action to have that piece of junk towed as abandoned. The room froze. In her fury, she had just confessed. Out loud, on record. In front of her neighbors, in front of Alvarez's recording device. Her own words, admitting she weaponized her title for revenge. Karen didn't even notice the doors open at the back of the room. She was too busy ranting, her voice breaking, her composure gone. She shouted about aesthetic harmony, about property values, her arms flailing like a drowning queen clinging to her crown. And then the air shifted. 4 figures walked down the center aisle, steady, deliberate. Officer Davis and Officer Reed, no uniforms this time, dark suits, serious eyes, 2 plainclothes detectives behind them. The neighbors' murmurs choked off into silence. The gavel slipped from Karen's fingers. Her face drained pale as the 4 stopped at the front of the room. Davis held up a folded piece of paper. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Karen Spruce, he said, his tone steady, calm. We have a warrant for your arrest, issued at the request of the state attorney's office. A collective gasp tore through the room. Karen stumbled back, her mouth opening and closing soundlessly. The condescending smile, the smug superiority, it all melted away. What stood in front of us wasn't the queen of the HOA. It was just a frightened woman who had pushed too far. Davis read the charges aloud, ticking them off like stones, dropping one by one. Conspiracy to commit grand theft auto. Attempted grand theft auto. Using a minor in the commission of a felony. Filing a false police report. Misuse of office. The weight of it crushed the room into stunned silence. Behind Karen, her 2 board members sat frozen. One whispered to the other, she really did it. Karen turned wild-eyed to her neighbors. This is all lies, fabricated. I was only protecting community standards. But no one believed her anymore. The detectives stepped forward. Calm, efficient. They read her rights as Davis lowered the warrant. Karen's voice cracked into a scream. This is harassment. This is vengeance. But the sound carried no power now. The power had shifted. And this time it wasn't hers. The gavel lay forgotten on the table, the sound of Karen's screams dissolving into stunned silence. For months she had commanded this neighborhood with a smirk and a threat. Now she stood pale and trembling, her wrists discreetly cuffed behind her back. Officer Davis didn't gloat. He simply folded the warrant back into his jacket and gave the room a nod. Apologies for the interruption. As you've heard, this is an active investigation. Another team is executing a search warrant at the Spruce residence right now. Please remain calm. But calm wasn't possible. The room buzzed with shock, neighbors whispering, gasping, some clutching their chairs like the floor had tilted under them. Tommy leaned across the aisle toward me, eyes wide. "Holy cow, Tim, you planned all this." I shook my head slowly. "I just collected the facts, she did the rest." Karen's face was blotchy, her voice high and desperate as the detectives guided her toward the exit. "This is all a setup. He's been harassing me. I was protecting this community." But her neighbors weren't buying it. I saw it in their faces, years of annoyance, fines, petty harassment, all clicking into place. The forged tow order, the texts, the videos, it wasn't just me she had bullied. She had turned the HOA into her kingdom, and everyone in that room had been a subject. Now the crown was gone. Deborah's hand tightened around mine. Phil sat straight-backed, eyes fixed on the scene, absorbing every detail. This was more than a neighborhood spat. This was justice played out in real time. The detectives read her rights in low voices as they walked her past the rows of plastic chairs. Karen's composure cracked completely. She twisted toward her board members, her voice shrill. "Say something! Stop this! I'm your president!" But the accountant stared at the floor, shame written across his face. The other woman pressed her lips into a thin line and didn't move. She was alone. The doors swung open, and in a rush of cool night air, Karen Spruce, the queen of our HOA, was led out like a common criminal. The room erupted. Whispers turned to sharp voices. Neighbors leaned across aisles, comparing stories. She fined me for painting my shutters. She made me move my garden gnome. She charged me for trash cans being visible. Each voice added another brick to the tower of resentment she had built, and that tower had just crumbled into dust. Investigator Alvarez stood and moved toward me, her expression calm, professional. She extended her hand. "Mr. Miller, thank you. Your preparation, your evidence, your patience, this made the case airtight. You gave us exactly what we needed." I shook her hand. "So what happens now?" "Now the legal system does its work. We have her on conspiracy, attempted theft, falsifying documents, misuse of office. With the texts and her confession tonight, there's no spinning this. The state attorney will move fast." Deborah's voice was steady, but there was fire in it. "And Ryan?" Alvarez softened slightly. "He's a minor, first offense. He'll likely be offered diversion, community service, counseling, a clean record if he completes it. The fault here isn't his, Mrs. Miller, it's hers." Phil exhaled, long and slow. He didn't say it, but I could see the thought in his eyes. That could have been me if Mom or Dad had told me to do something reckless. Alvarez turned back toward the room, scanning the neighbors. "This isn't just about one truck. If you've been subjected to false fines, harassment, or misuse of HOA authority, now is the time to come forward. Everything will be reviewed." That was the match. Hands shot up, voices poured out. Stories of bogus violations, inflated fines, threats disguised as community standards. It was like floodgates opening. All the resentment Karen had buried under intimidation now surged into daylight. And for the first time in months, I saw unity. This wasn't Karen's community anymore. It was ours. By the time the meeting adjourned, the board was in ruins. Both of Karen's allies resigned on the spot. A special election was scheduled. And by the end of the night, Tommy, robe, Crocs, and all, had been nominated as interim president. It felt absurd, almost comical, but in that absurdity there was relief. Neighbors clapped him on the shoulder, laughing nervously, saying, "You'll be better than her." I stepped outside into the cool night. The parking lot buzzed with conversation, clusters of neighbors talking in low, urgent voices. Some clapped me on the back, thanked me, shook their heads in disbelief. I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. Deborah slipped her arm through mine. It's over. But I wasn't so sure. For her, maybe. For us, we'll see. Because justice isn't a clean ending. It's a process. And while Karen was in handcuffs tonight, tomorrow she'd be in a courtroom, facing lawyers, judges, deals. Still, tonight was a shift, a turning point. The neighborhood that had felt divided, suspicious, tense, suddenly it felt lighter, like a weight had been lifted off all of us at once. And as I walked Deborah and Phil to the truck, I saw Betty sitting steady under the moonlight, her black paint gleaming, her presence solid and unbroken. They tried to take her in the dark, they tried to tow her in the day, and they failed both times. Because some things can't be stolen, not with a relay box, not with a forged order, not even with power and intimidation. Betty wasn't just a truck anymore. She was proof that sometimes the quiet fight back and win. The war ended not with shouts but with silence. In the weeks after Karen's arrest, the spruce house went dark. A discreet for sale sign sprouted on the lawn, and the curtains never opened again. Sometimes I'd catch a faint glow of a TV flickering inside, but there were no waves, no glares, no smug smiles, just shadows waiting to disappear. The state attorney moved quickly. With texts, video, the forged tow order, and her own recorded words, Karen didn't stand a chance. She pled out. Conspiracy dropped to lesser counts, but the punishment was heavy: steep fines, long probation, restitution to the HOA, and a permanent no-contact order with my family. Ryan was spared prison, diversion program, community service, counseling. A typed apology letter slid into my mailbox one morning, stiff and formal, signed in a shaky hand. Phil skimmed it, shrugged. "Hope he does better next time," he said, then went back to his calculus homework. He was right. The boy had chosen wrong, but his mother had loaded the choice. The HOA itself imploded. Karen's allies resigned the same night she was arrested. At the special meeting, Tommy, still in Crocs, still baffled, was elected president by unanimous vote. His first motion was simple: audit every fine, every violation Karen had ever issued. By sundown, half of them had vanished into thin air. Refund checks arrived in mailboxes by Friday. And something strange happened. People started waving again. Conversations bloomed at mailboxes instead of festering in group emails. Lawns looked a little less like battlefields and more like homes. By summer, our block party was the biggest in years. Grills smoking, kids racing bikes, laughter echoing down the street like it had been waiting for a chance to come back. Inside our own home, the command post disappeared. Wires were packed away, laptops returned to normal use. Deborah reclaimed the kitchen table for family dinners. For the first time in weeks, I sat with a cold drink on the porch, not scanning shadows, not gripping binoculars, just listening to the night breathe again. Betty stayed in the driveway, her gloss black paint catching moonlight. I tightened her defenses: Faraday pouch for the keys, master battery cutoff, even a wheel lock now and then. Not paranoia, practice. Because once you've been tested, you don't forget how fragile peace really is. Phil earned his license. On his first solo drive, he didn't reach for Deborah's sedan. He asked for Betty. I stood in the driveway, watching him slide behind the wheel, steady hands at 10 and 2. He rolled out smooth, confident, my old truck carrying the next generation like a banner. And in that moment, I realized Betty had become more than steel and bolts. She was our symbol. Proof that family could withstand intimidation, deceit, even conspiracy, and come out stronger. Karen thought she was fighting a mechanic with a beat-up truck. What she really fought was a family bound tighter than she ever understood. She thought power came from a title and a gavel. She never understood that real power comes from truth and from people willing to stand their ground. One night, weeks later, I sat on the porch with Deborah, the sky clean and cool above us. Down the block, a dog barked, reconsidered, and went quiet again. From the garage came the faint click-click of Phil's ratchet, a low whistle off-key. The world felt taller somehow, lighter. Deborah leaned her head on my shoulder. "Worth it?" she asked softly. I looked at Betty, steady in the driveway, her paint drinking moonlight like ink. I thought of the sleepless nights, the trap we'd set, the boy we'd caught, the woman who fell on her own sword. And I thought of the quiet that had returned, The laughter on the street, the safety in my son's eyes. Yeah, I said finally, worth it. Because this fight was never about chrome or pride. It was about dignity, about holding the line when someone tried to take more than they had a right to, about using law, not vengeance, patience, not fury. Sometimes justice doesn't look like victory. Sometimes it looks like balance restored piece by piece. Tonight the air was still, my family was safe. My truck gleamed steady under the stars, and the street, for the first time in a long time, felt like home again. And that was everything. You've heard this confession, now wait until you hear the next one. The truth that shatters everything you thought you knew.